Welcome everyone to this week in Svelte, finally episode 140. It only took like 3 weeks to do that. Unfortunately, I've been sick for a while and then I was traveling, so like, pardon me. Luckily, like we didn't miss much. There were not so many releases, so we can actually go over them now. Well, let's jump right into it and let's see what the changelog will bring us. So, we have fix don't mark derived while an effect is updating. That is an interesting. I'm curious about the details. Setting state inside effect slightly slower theoretically since it's a new word, but I verified the original issue for which we introduced this is still fast with this change. Yeah, okay, so it fixes this issue here, which is if content remain visible when condition is false, which is a regression. There is also a new PR open for this, which is when an if condition and a component inside the block depend on the same shared state and the component mutates the state during render, the if condition no longer reacts to subsequent changes. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, those are like, I think, derived, especially when they change during render, they are a bit of a pain to deal with. You shouldn't really do it, but I've seen some like weird reproduction for stuff like that. So do not dispatch intro start event with animation of animate directive. I think this was just like the intro start event should not, like, it should just be emitted for transitions, I think, not for animate. So it was like a small bug, a small misunderstanding. We have a pretty big release of Svelte 5.55.6, so let's see what happened. So leave stale promises to wait for a later resolution instead of rejecting. So if there is a stale promise, so something that will never resolve, it will wait for a later resolution and it will not reject. Key dependency of state eager/pending. Not sure what the bug is, but state eager/pending. Let me see. Okay, so when an eager effect reruns, so an eager effect is an effect that basically during the batch is executed immediately, and when it reruns, the version source is destroyed and recreated. So this means that all the dependencies were also lost, and that is important when state eager is indirectly used in a block effect. It's rescheduled to run, and another source is also dirty and rescheduled to run in a microtask before flash eager run. I am so glad that Simon and Rich have like a deep understanding of desync reactivity, like how desync reactivity work, because some of those stuff are so trippy. So that's like, it is like, you see, like you've seen me go over the changes, because obviously right now the main goal is basically get async, await, and remote function out of experimental, right? So obviously they are working a lot on that, and the important bit is also that not only that, but at this point it's pretty like stable, so like you can actually use it but this means that the bugs are the subtlety, like are the edge cases. And the edge cases in an async world are messed up. Like you've seen, like there are race conditions and stuff like that. So like it's a mess. Reapply context after transforming error during SSR. So basically the point was during SSR you can define a transform error, which basically means that if any of the boundaries inside your Svelte code throws, you get, if any of those throws, you get an error, and you can transform that error, and that error is then passed to the boundary. And you can do that by, like, when you are rendering, so if you invoke render from Svelte server, you can transform. And the problem was that the context was not reapplied after the transformation, which meant that like the component was not working properly, like the boundary was not working properly. Don't rebase just created batches. So like if you create, let's see, it's possible to rebase just created batches. Batch R runs effect. One of those effects write to a source. This creates a new batch B. After an effect after that, still part of the flash effect batch A, executed arrived. Like, do you see how hard the reproduction for these are? I don't know how they managed to do this. Like, that's crazy. Chore allow null for pending in typings. This is just a typing thing. But the interesting bit here is what like generated this. Basically, this issue was opened. I think like it's a nice pattern because of the suggestion by Rich inside the remote function thread discussion, which is this. Basically, like if you do stuff like this, this basically means that the content of this boundary will basically load lazily. So like it will not server-side, like it will server-side render if you are server-side rendering, but if you are client-side rendering, it will actually not await the component. Basically, it's a bit weird to say, but basically the point is you are only allowing a pending, like you're only including a pending snippet in the Svelte boundary when the navigation is a browser navigation. This basically means that the content of the Svelte boundary during server-side render will actually server-side render, but during client-side navigation, it will show the pending snippet and then load the data. So this is basically a pattern that you can use if you want to like server-side render something, but also when JavaScript is enabled and you know that, you can just quickly load the page with a loading spinner and then load the data. So it's an interesting pattern. However, like how Rich wrote it wrote it with null, and technically you could not add null as a typing, and now you can. So that's nice. Sorry. Flash eager effect in production. We are not adding either effect inside mark reaction when dev is false. As a result, production build could have state eager or state pending not working correctly. Oh, that's nice. So like, it's nice that like this was, oh, come on. It's nice that this was not like bug reported. So, I mean, it probably didn't affect a lot of people, so it's fine. Fix retro error of failed iterable after calling return. So the point is, if there is an iterable, you can call return on an iterable. And if there was an error after calling that, it was not rethrown, and now it is actually rethrown. So if you are iterating over an iterable that fails in this way, it will now properly propagate the error. Account for proxified instance when updating bind Ds. This was a bug, basically, if you were assigning to bind Ds, and it was, let me see the issue. Yeah, exactly. Reactive bind Ds for components in each has unexpected behavior. So like if you were looping over something and then binding to Ds, the value of the component or the element was not properly updated for bind Ds. It was updated like every other binding were actually updated, but bind Ds required a specific fix for this. Ensure scheduled batch is flushed if not obsoleted. Obsolete. This is another thing. I think like the obsolete batches are something that were introduced recently. Resolve stale derived with the latest value. So once again, let me see. Currently, if an async derived resolve in batch 2 before it resolves in batch 1, we reject the promise belonging to batch 1 and by extension the batch itself. This means that any other changes in batch 1 are silently discarded incorrectly. Okay, so yeah, basically what Bridge said. Remove unnecessary increment pending calls. I don't know why they are unnecessary. This might not be necessary at one point, but I'm confident they are unnecessary now. Increment pending happens if necessary inside flatten, which is called inside async, and defer template effect. So there's no need to call it inside those function as well. So yeah, a bit of cleanup. Correctly compile component member expression for SSR. Component member expressions, I think those are when you have like an object that has a component inside, it was not compiled correctly for SSR. Yeah, so like if you have something like this where you have like icons, something like this, yeah, something like this, this was not compiling correctly during SSR. If you did something like this, like you can technically do this, like this is an actual way to create a component, but during server-side rendering, this was not correctly compiled without the intermediate derived, and so it was failing, and now it is not. It's just a matter of compilation. Reset source.updated stack traces after flush. So those are source.updated are the basically this is where we keep the stack traces for where a source has been updated, so that we can show them in case you do inspect.trace, and but they were not updated after a flush, and now they are. Replacing async blocking strategy with merging. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't, let me see. This is another attempt to address some of the tricky edge cases that arise when async batches resolve out of order. The idea is this. Essentially, when a batch resolve, we find the latest... Oh, yeah, I saw this. Okay. This is another... do you see like the amount of explanation that Rich and Simon have to do inside a PR? It's really like telling about how complex this problem is. And I'm flabbergasted every time. Allow debug tags to reference awaited variables. Okay, that's nice. So now if you want, you can actually do add debug with an awaited variable. That's nice. Rerun fallback props if dependencies update. Okay, so basically if one of the dependency, like if you have a fallback and that fallback has a dependency, like it's a reactive variable, it will rerun the fallback prop so that like it's actually updated. Abort running obsolete async branches. Basically, this is I think where the concept of an obsolete async branch is introduced, and basically those are aborted right now. Ignore comments when reading CSS values. I'm curious about this. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so like basically, yeah, if you have a comment with a like a quotation, it was messing up the compilation. That's nice. Okay. Wrap promise.all in save during SSR. So this was just basically like when you were destructuring an array, and that array was an array of a derived. I mean, let me show you. I actually fixed this, but the point is, if you had something like this, like you had multiple await user.name, await user.image inside alt and source, and the other the other thing is that you also had to add a Svelte head inside. But the problem was that when you had a situation like this, it created basically a race condition between this thing and the Svelte head. And the reason for that was that the generated code during server-side rendering was not wrapping. Basically, if you take a look at the generated code of these, let me actually show you. Val.dev/playground. If you take a look at the generated server-side code for this, I mean, not right now in 5.5.4, I guess. If I take a look at the JS output of the server, you can see that basically, like in the head, this is happening. Like it's rendering the title and blah blah blah. It's fine. But the point is that if you see here, this is doing like it's rendering a child, which is this one, and it's an async function. And inside here, we are doing await promise.all to basically make sure that these two that doesn't depend one on each other, they run concurrently. So like you await one single time. And then we destructure the values here, and then we actually push them into the HTML that is generated. The problem in this version of Svelte was that if you see this await promise.all, and this was actually a problem just in dev, if you are if we are gonna be like it was just a dev issue, because the problem was when you do this basically creates a race condition with this render.push. I mean, actually render.title, because what this do is that it's rendering a child, it awaits the promise, and it doesn't restore the context. So the context is saved here and restored here. This is how async await works. Like whenever we encounter an await, we store the context, then we await the promise, and then we restore the context. And that's very important because once you push, then there is this push element here. And this is basically saying, let me check that we are actually still like in the context of an image, and this is reading the context, okay? So since this is reading the context, it's very important that after we do this, we actually have the right context. So like there is a context here that says we are inside this image tag. There is a context here, and this context is saved inside this function and restored here. Now the problem is that the context is also updated by this head here. So once this head finish running, it resets the context to null. And this was not a problem if the whole await promise.all was wrapped in save, because this will await the promise.all and then restore the context. But basically what happened here is that the race condition was you store the context and then you restore it. You store the context and then you restore it. You are still awaiting promise.all, so you wait an extra tick. And since you wait an extra tick, after that head set the context to null. So the context that was restored here, it's nullified by the head. And so when you reach push element, it tries to read the context and it doesn't, it's not there and it fails. And so if we like the solution was actually pretty easy. It's just to wrap the save with save also the promise.all. So pretty easy fix. Let's switch back to our beloved Svelte Changelog. Let's see if we have something else. Ignore false positive error of inspect dependencies. So inspect is a bit of a weird rule because it runs synchronously. So the reason why it runs synchronously is because we want to make sure that the stack traces are actually correct. The issue with that is that what can happen is that if you have some running effects synchronously, it's a bit of a it's a bit of a foot gun, because since the moment you change some variable, what could happen is that a derived that, or maybe an effect that needs to update another source is not run after the update state, and then you read it and it's basically in an incongruent state, and so it can throw some false positive errors, but I guess yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's exactly what I was talking about. If you have an inspect, it could happen, and it's inside an if, it could happen that you are reading some value that it's not there. Yeah, it's basically the inspect run before the if. So even if you are running the inspect under an if that should guard against the existence of something, it could happen that the inspect is reading that before the if runs. So yeah, that's just a small thing. There are a couple of long comments, so let me actually read. I use Svelte since 2021. Let me do this. I use Svelte since 2021 and I never realized to look at the JS output, and I definitely needed that kind of line-by-line explanation to even have a chance to understanding it. Yeah, I think this is something that I love to do. I do it now because when I'm debugging and I'm fixing some bugs in Svelte, I have to do it. But even before maintaining, I was constantly reading the JS output. It's something that I love to do, learning how the compiler compiled can really help you understand how Svelte works on a certain level. And yeah, I think it's a very nice. Let me see. There is also another question, which is I think Svelte looks great, but how would it work with Firebase snapshot listeners, for example? Is it mainly designed for simple await get type of network requests? So I don't know how Firebase snapshot listener work specifically. If I'd have to guess, I would say like from my understanding, like Firebase, it's emitting some event, right? And I'm not sure you really have to await those, right? So like you might await the connection, but then you just get some event when something happens. I might be mistaken. If you have an example, we can try to look at it. But yeah, I mean, like await, like the async await Svelte thing is mostly for stuff that you are like it's mostly for stuff that you are awaiting like for yeah it's basically like it's for promises that actually resolves. Like if it's a stream, for example, that's a different kind of stuff. Like you probably need to set up a way to read the stream synchronously and then emit some event to keep the reactivity in check. I would guess. Like obviously, I don't have any. Like for example, if you are using server sent event, you will likely use event source, which is a synchronous API, and then emits events, right? You are not awaiting. Yeah, at the end of the day, like all these sort of things are generally associated with events that are emitted rather than like a long running await. But like feel free to like if you have an example, feel free to share it either here or you can ping me on Discord and we can take a look at it. We have a release which Svelte Changelog is rightfully flagging as containing security fixes. So if you don't know, Vercel actually sponsored a bug bounty program for Svelte. So if you find a security vulnerability in Svelte, you can report it through the bug bounty program on HackerOne. And if the security vulnerability is deemed like an actual security vulnerability, you will actually get paid for it. And this has been fantastic because we are getting a bunch of like auditing out of this. So like there's a lot of people that actually audit Svelte and makes it more secure. So we got a lot of security like of CVAs, which might seem like a bad thing, but it's not actually a bad thing because first thing first, those security vulnerabilities are generally very difficult to exploit. Those are for stuff that are either experimental, like the async await stuff, or still like it requires the developer to do something weird with the API. And the other positive things is that obviously once we know them, we can fix them, and then like we don't have the problem anymore. So those have been security disclosed, and so we fix them, and now they are not a bug anymore. So fix prevent XSS on hydratable from user contents. Let me see. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I'm trying to find the right test. String replacement characters from being interpreted. Okay. So like this V here is actually, oh gosh, that's, okay, yeah. Okay, this was clever. Basically, to serialize this, what we did, like to serialize the hydratable, and if you're not aware, hydratable is basically like you can have well.dev/playground. You can import hydratable from Svelte. And basically you can do something like const x is equal to hydratable, and you have to specify a key, so something, and then you can pass a function, and this can actually be an async function like a promise, and then you can fetch something, for example, and then this basically gets serialized so that it's not refetched on the client. So it's fetched on the server and then it's not refetched on the client, gets serialized, and then is inlined in the HTML, so that then hydratable just read from the HTML instead of refetching. And obviously, like to do this, we are doing serialized and we are replacing the placeholder for something. But the point is, given that like we were just using this string, the security vulnerability is that inside V, you could have, like it could have been user controlled, and a user could have snuck in some replacement character. So basically, let's say that you did, like again, what we said before, let's say that we do this, like let's say that you fetch from richuti.me/malicious, right? I have this, and let's say that I return something from malicious, and if that something had these replacement characters in it, I could control how the replacement work, which is like a very hard job to do, but it's a security, like it's a nice security vulnerability, which now is not a vulnerability anymore. There's a bump to the value, which also was compromised. I mean, not compromised, but like it had a vulnerability. Disallow empty attribute names during SSR, which I assume. I'm curious. Yeah, okay, so basically, oh, that was clever. Like, you could have technically used something like this, which was like an empty attribute, and then the value of the attribute was on mouse over alert like this. And given how we treat the SSR HTML, this would have been basically like adding this mouse over alert, blah blah blah. That's another nice vulnerability. Hardened regex. This is probably the regex for a valid tag name. Okay, so like instead of being everything, it's actually eager, so that's nice. And moves Svelte runtime properties to symbols. That's another small thing. Like basically inside, in our how can I say, like in the runtime, you see that like we attach something to the HTML element itself in underscore underscore attributes to store the old attributes in the cache, basically. And but this was like, this could allow for DOM clobbering, and so now we actually use this attribute cache, which is a symbol instead, and it's better. Okay, so yeah, that was a long one. Let's see. Let's go to SvelteKit, which has 5 new release. And in the meantime, let me see. The Firebase. Let me see here. So text, yes, the Firebase real-time listener. The pseudocode is on snapshot, changed val, blah blah blah. So there's no clear place to await, since it's callback based with synchronous step. Yeah, but like, you don't have to await in this case, right? You are just getting the new DB value and you are updating Svelte var with the new DB value. So you don't have to await anything, right? You are just registering a callback, which is different from awaiting something. If you want to await something for some reason, like, I don't know, let's say that you want to, let's say that this new DB value, so, okay, let's say that you have a situation like this, right? So you have a script and you have on snapshot, for example, from Firebase, db val, and let's say that this is like username, for example. And now let's say that, I don't know, you want to fetch the username, for example. What you can do is that you can do stuff like let name is equal $state, like this, and then you can do name is equal to username. And then where you will await is here. So you can do user is equal $derived, and then you can do something like await Firebase dot get like, I don't know, user, like something like that. I'm again, it's pseudocode. I'm not sure how Firebase did this kind of stuff, but like, that's the thing. Like, here basically you don't have to await anything. You're just registering a callback and you are getting this function invoked whenever this thing change. So you can just change it, and this will actually refetch every time name changes. I don't know if this answers your question. So let's see SvelteKit. Oh, that's also a lot of stuff. So we have allow query.current.error.loading and ready to work in non-reactive context. Oh, that's nice. So it's now back to be able to do it. That's nice. So basically now you can do query.current, .error.loading. You can actually read those in non-reactive context. There was a moment before where it was not allowed. Prevent deep set crash on nullish nested value. I have no idea. Deep set, I think it's setting the pages. Let's see. Fix restore correct remote form field typing for nullable array fields when a schema uses default. I have no idea what this means. Okay. Don't warn about removing the SSI comment in transform page chunk. Server side include directive like blah 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 are HTML comments that are replaced by servers such as ngx. Previously, removing them in transform page chunk would trigger a false positive warning about breaking Svelte hydration. Since SSI comments always start with this and Svelte hydration comments never do, they can be safely excluded from the check. Okay. So basically, we are warning about removing comments because that can break Svelte hydration. This is fine because they start with this, and like Svelte hydration never will start with that. Change enhanced function return type from maybe probably void. throw an error when resolve is called with an external URL. So resolve obviously only works with internal URL. If you try to call it with an external URL, it's throwing an error. Avoid flash of unstyled content for CSR only pages by loading styles and font before client-side routing start. Also, nice thing, I got signaled this bug, and the reason is that crates.io, which is the Rust community crate registry, is basically npm for Rust. Like, this is all the Rust packages. This website now uses SvelteKit. So they had this bug, and I know the maintainer, and he said, hey, is this normal in Svelte? And I say, well, probably no. And it's actually fixed. So where it is. Reset form result on redirect. So that's nice. When you are redirecting, the form result is actually reset. We have also a few minor changes. There is a breaking change limit in requested as originally intended. So basically, we recently changed how you let me show you how you refresh from the client. So when you are requested, okay. So basically, what you can do is this, right? So on the server, I can say, okay, when I update this post, I know that I want to refresh the get post ID result, right? Oh, I think this changed the name, but regardless, like, this was refresh before. But basically the point is, this is out, like, okay, yeah, you can just do refresh if you want. But basically the point is, this is telling Svelte, hey, please, get post now needs to be called once again. So like, basically, instead of gets to be called once again, like, this form is changing the value of get post. So please fetch it again. Now, to prevent SvelteKit from fetch it again, what you actually do is that you call refresh on the server, and the new value of get post is actually sent back with the same API call, so that on the client the data is updated without an extra fetch request. However, it's not always that simple, because sometimes the actual value, like the actual structure, like the actual, like in this case, post ID, in this case it's very simple, like it's just the ID and you already have it. But sometimes it's actually more complex what you are invoking the post with. For example, filter author Santa, right? This is not something that you actually need to send to the submit operation, but you need this value on the server to be able to refresh it. And so what you can do is that you can say, okay, I want to override post with this new post, and I want to say, I want to update this value here of get post. And you can also do get post to request all the active instances. So this will basically say, okay, refresh every get post query with this submit value. However, this is not enough to do it. What you have to do is that you have to import this requested from app server, and then this requested basically returns the arguments, like the queries that you need to refresh. And the important bit is that, as you can see, okay, I want all the get post query that need to refresh, and you also need to pass a limit. So before it was optional, but this is actually a hard requirement, because if you don't pass a limit, what can happen is that from the client, they can basically like stagger your server to make your server do a lot of work just by sending a custom crafted payload to your server. So like they will send like a post request to this endpoint with, hey, let me refresh like 1,000 of get post, and your server will spend a lot of time refreshing all of them, and it will do a lot of work. So to prevent this, you now need to pass a limit. So you know how many you are expecting. You know that this will likely request just one. So you can specify the limit here, and this will basically make sure that no more than that can be requested from the client. And there is a comment here which is appropriate, which is, holy moly, RPC issue from 20 years ago all over again. Yeah, I mean, RPC is all over the rage nowadays, but obviously like there are a few issues with them, and we hope that we solved most of them. Like I think remote functions are actually working pretty well right now, so I think it's fine. Feat remote query function gains an optional third generic parameter validated defaulting to input that represent the argument type after schema validation transformation. That's nice. So basically you also get a third parameter, which is the validated value. Breaking requested now yields arg query entries instead of the validated argument. So that was why I remember having the arguments. Instead, like you have the argument and the query. Okay, this is done, and we have a new minor, which is support query.batch in requested. So now you can also request, like use request with query.batch, which is nice. Breaking on the server, make the promise return from refresh represent adding the refresh to the map, not the time it takes to run the remote function. But basically the point I think is that when you do a wait refresh, you are just adding to the map, not actually running the remote function, which means that like your response is actually faster because you're just adding it to the map and not actually running the remote function. Experimental query live function. This is very, very nice. And this kind of also pairs with the Firebase stuff that we were talking before, because query.live is basically a way for SvelteKit, like it's a new remote function that allows you to have live data in your application. And it is super nice. What you can do, and let me show you. Yeah, we have just remote function enabled. So let me create new file. Let's say that I have time.remote.js. I can import from $up/server. I can import query, and then I can do export const time is equal query.live. Now query.live requires you to pass an async function generator. If you never use them, they are pretty fun to use. It does require this weird syntax, like you need to do async function star, but this basically is a function, and this is the only place in JavaScript when you can use the yield query, yield parameters. This function, basically, when you execute this function, you basically get back an array, like an iterable, and you can spread these, you can call next after one after the other. But the important bit is that basically what you can do is that, like, I can say yield 1, yield 2, yield 3, right? And when you do this, when you reach a yield function, the the runtime goes back to the invoker. So if I invoke this function and I do next, it will reach this point and then stop. And after it stops, it goes like, it waits for the next before invoking that. So just to show you, if I do this, I think sleep, no. Okay, I can do function sleep, milliseconds, return new promise, r set timeout, r milliseconds, right? So we have a sleep function. Now if I want, I can do await sleep 1000, await sleep 1000, and await sleep 1000, right? I mean, you don't need to do that anymore. But what this means is that this will, when you invoke this query live, this will yield 1 immediately, then it will wait for a second, and then it will yield 2, then it will wait for another second, and then it will yield 3. This means that if I import from time.remote.js, like this, and I import time from there, if I do await time, this will do 1, 2, and 3. Now, obviously, this will now stop here. But the nice thing is that you can actually, if I want, inside an async function generator, it's actually the only place where you can safely do while true. So I can do while true, and I can yield, I don't know, I can actually do this. Let I is equal to 0, yield I++, and then I can await sleep 1000 milliseconds. And now, if I refresh the page, you should see I might need to kill the server. Ah, what happened? Ah, I had too much confidence in this. Let me see. Can I share code via hash? Notes. I need to refresh the page. I don't know where to share them. Edit extensions. Where can I share them? Which is not copy link. Should be copy link. Okay. Regardless. What happens if I do messages? Yeah, I don't have this set up. Oh gosh, I hate Apple in this case. AirDrop. Like, there's no way for me to copy this link without notes. Okay, save. Can I open my notes now and I have it there? Okay. I guess. Okay, so let's see. So like this will now work properly. But basically, the point is that in this case, what it will do Yeah, so it creates a stream. That's exactly what it creates. So as you can see, like we can see 0, 1, 2, 3, and this will go on forever. And obviously, like in this case, we are just returning I++. But you can imagine that if instead of returning I++, this was live data that we were getting from a WebSocket and then streamed down, we would actually get live updates very, very easily. So this is very, very exciting. Unwrap promise in remote command output type. Empty call to updates on a command form invocation means don't update anything, which is nice. Like you now have a way to like say, hey, this doesn't update anything. Form field foo as checkbox default value now works. Fix remote forms with default value defined by field as text default value now correctly reset to the provided default value once submitted. Make sure queries always get started correctly. Allow plain function as overrides in updates. Resolve paths to root files with the letter drive on window. Oh, come on, Windows errors. Allow submit and hidden form field to accept number and booleans, which is nice. Warn on unread form remote function validation issue. So like if you have validation issue and you don't read them, we actually warn you. That's nice. I didn't know we did that. Abort navigation after async rendering is obsolete. Skip refreshing queries on full page reload form submission. Okay, so if it's a full page reload, you don't need to refresh the query after a form submission because the full page will already refresh the query. Okay. We also have a bump to Svelte and the value and prevent query batch crosstalk. So those were two small vulnerabilities. Once again, it's just if you are using cross batch in a certain way. We have a new release of the Svelte MCP, which is allow stdio MCP to read the content of the file directly. So now if you are using the Svelte MCP as an stdio, instead of the agent having to write the whole file once again to validate it, it can just point at the file and say, hey, please read this file. Handle non-call expression passed to isRune. This was just an issue like in the parsing. So if the code had a certain shape, it was failing to parse. And there was also remove DB requirement. This was just something like we were using a DB, but it was not actually needed, so we removed it. We have two new releases of SV utils. Add min version and coarse version from somewhere, deprecate split version. SV utils is the package that you can use to build SV add-ons that Jean presented last time. And those are basically a bunch of utils that you can use when you want to interact with the code base. So in this case, if you want to check what's the min version of the coarse version of a certain package, you can do that with these exposed versions. Handle PNPM 11 with add PNPM allow build. Sorry guys. That auto detects the installed PNPM version and writes allow builds or the legacy only build dependency list. Deprecate PNPM only build dependency. So this is like, it's something that changed in PNPM that required a fix inside SV utils. Improves Svelte version detection. There are also some other utils for JavaScript. For example, append from string no longer corrupts the output. Created name from crashing when the AST contains an exported functional class declaration. Just import add name now respect is type. Just object create no longer corrupts the AST. Okay. We have 3 new release of Vite plugins Svelte. Enable optimizer for server environment during dev. TypeScript only remove import and transform with OXE and with preprocess. Correctly resolved compiled CSS for optimized Svelte dependency on the server, and correctly resolved compiled CSS on the server for dependency with Svelte files. Oh gosh, there's a lot of release. I don't think we can go over everything. Let's see. Okay, this improves the no navigation without resolve. We have 2 new releases of the extension, support for TypeScript 6, and hoist self-referenced props interface, prevent duplicate diagnostic, so you don't get duplicate diagnostic from the LSP. Prevent incorrect types import being injected when moving plus page.svelte files. Properly place Svelte ignore comment in quick fix when script module. So if you were quick fixing something with Svelte ignore, if there was a script module, it was putting that into the wrong place. We have a new release of printer plugin Svelte. No, yeah. Preserve non-breaking space, handle comments in bind get set tuple, handle computed properties in each blocks. 2 new release of SV, which is drizzle, don't cancel if D1 is selected without adapter Cloudflare, but add an info. Skip add-on when depends on dependency cancel. Scope deprecated tag to the legacy create overload only. Move playwright install from prepare to test end-to-end. Improve vtest v3 detection. Register worked and sharped as PMPM allow build when the Cloudflare adapter is selected. Resolve package manager before applying add-on, so PMPM only logic in add-ons actually runs. Okay, that's nice. This is just like, yeah, flush standard error before exit, report diagnostic in tsconfig. Use the Svelte config compiler optional runes function value if set. So basically, this compiler option.runes now it's also available as a function, and by using it inside Svelte ESLint parser, it means that when it detects the Svelte config, if there is a function, it's actually using the function instead of just checking if it's true or false. 2 new release of the language server, which is still the same basically as the extension. Same thing for Svelte to TSX. We have 2 new releases of the value, one of which is for, I guess, maybe 2, but fit add stringify async for async serialization, but this forces sparse arrays to allocate sparsely. I think this is the actual security vulnerability, so even if you are using the value in some of your project, please update. And then we have 2 new ESWrap fix, which is add location to keywords, print type parameters and return type of arrow function, and default of type parameters, and also emit valid TypeScript for aliased inline type import specifier. Oh my god. Like if you have something like this, import type foo as bar, like it's actually printed correctly by ESWrap. Okay, I think that's actually it now. It was a lot. I mean, I've been absent for like almost a month, so there were a lot of releases, but I think it was fun. And we also talked a bit about Query Live and about async Svelte. So I hope that you learned something. I hope that you enjoyed today's stream. and I hope to see you next Friday. Thanks a lot for joining me, and I'll see you guys next Friday.